Hello there, thank you so much for joining us. This is a special program and this is a live transmission coming to you live on your screen on channel 277, that's on DSTV. Go TV, we're coming to you on channel 23. And on top side is channel 89. Now this is a very special program as I've earlier alluded, and my name is Alfred Chimba. I am your host. And today on this particular special program, or special edition of it, we do have representative coming from the Alliance for Community Action. And of course, let me just get into it and get to briefly give you a background, as they have embarked on a project called Constitutional Equity Citizens Voice. Now, Alliance for Community Action has firmly believes that without amendments to the constitution, Zambia's democracy could regress with fairly small changes in political actors, and much of the work being done by civil society and other actors to advance the project, as well as country-size democracy and governance in Zambia, which recently emerged out of the decade of regression, is fundamentally weakened if the basic law of the land does not protect it. And of course, according to ACA, it believes that Zambian history has shown the constitution that does not fully protect citizen rights and democratic principles can lead to democratic and governance regression, even when citizens embrace democracy through elections. And since Zambia's citizens have been actively trying to strengthen the Republican Constitution since the return to the multi-party politics in 1991, these efforts have been either thwarted or hijacked by demonstration after demonstration, with sitting governments choosing to exploit weak provisions to govern and democratically or perpetuate political incumbents. It is also true that the small constitutional advances that have been made, arguably reluctantly on the part of power holders, have still managed to significantly protect Zambian governance and democracy. This particular morning, we are meant to believe that the proposed initiative argues that constitution still contains multiple provisions that citizens have wanted to change, but the government has refused to. Now, these, though popularly proposed by citizens, were removed from 2016 amendment. And more to the background is that most importantly, Zambia's constitution does not command the popular respect it needs to prevent governments from amending it for their own interests in the future. Substantively, it accords the presidency inordinate powers that make separation of powers, for example, academic. Now, this proposed initiative proposes that amendments to the constitution are of ultimate importance. This proposed initiative is further informed by the realization that any changes of the subsidiary legislation as well as institutional mechanisms are only as strong as the extent to which constitutional safeguards protect them from manipulation or disregard by the ruling political administration. And of course, that's a brief background to this particular project that the ACA, which is the Alliance for Community Action, has embarked on. Now, this particular morning, as I did earlier indicate, that we do have a representative coming from the ACA, and he is a Programmes Manager, that's Jimmy Maliseni. Joins me on set to discuss a lot more over issues that are aligned to this particular program. Mr. Jimmy, good morning and thank you so much for coming.
Good morning, Alfred, and good morning to your viewers. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's come to the overview of the project itself. That's a Constitutional Equity Citizens Voice. Can you provide an overview of the ACA project and its main objectives?
Well, as the project name suggests, Alfred, this initiative is essentially anchored in promoting citizens' voices around constitutional reforms. And as you've ably given the background to your viewers in terms of what the focus of the project is, but also what its motivations are, what we want to do overall in this project is to ensure that at the point that we embark on the substantive constitutional reforms as a country, the people's voices must be heard. we are trying to create platforms in various ways through which the people can express themselves. Firstly, because they are rights holders, but also secondly, because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and everything else we do essentially in terms of our legal framework must conform to what the Constitution has set as a standard. And so what we're trying to do through various activities is to ensure that we collect as many citizen voices as possible, but also we collect those voices from different geopolitical constructs of the country. So the project is spread across 4 districts across the country, all of them rural towns. And the idea for us as the Alliance for Community Action in our current strategic period is to ensure that we are, as far as it is possible, bringing the voices of the marginalized into the national conversation. And so our current strategic approach is called the rural approach, which essentially means that we are focusing on our work, the bulk of it, in rural areas, but also in the rural parts of rural areas. So, for instance, you might have a district, say like Kalomo, which overall is considered rural. But when we arrive in Kalomo, we want to work in the rural parts of Kalomo. Think of the rural parts of Katete as well, and so on and so forth. And then secondly, we also realize that young people are an extremely important demography in the country. As a matter of fact, we have reason to believe that young people decided the 2021 election. If you count the number of people that were 35 years or younger, which is the official youth demography for the country, then you realize how powerful that voting bloc is. But we are not targeting all of them at once. We are currently targeting those that are in institutions of higher learning because they are opinion leaders, but they also tend to have a lot of influence over other young people in an informed way. Currently, the country is grappling with informed debate, or the lack thereof, I must say. So there's a lot of shouting, there's more volume, for lack of a better term, than substance. So people are speaking more, people are speaking louder, but a lot of, let's say, for lack of a better term, uninformed sometimes our opinions are. So this project essentially wants to help guide or form the conversation around constitutional reforms in an informed manner. And so that is what we are going to be doing overall.
Interesting, now that you've embarked on the rural approach. Now, I want to find out, what are some of the activities that you've aligned in this particular project?
Okay, so the first activity is the one we are doing, you and me, Alfred, sitting here at Crown TV. So we are grateful to Crown TV for agreeing to partner with us on this project. So you are our number one partners insofar as the launch of the project is concerned. We are going to have a series of radio programs here at Crown TV, I think 9 in total. I will not be on the subsequent editions. There will be other people that will come. And in those subsequent programs, we're going to discuss specific issues around constitutional reforms. For instance, is the time right? What should we be looking at in our constitutional reforms? Are we ripping up the document and writing a new one? If that's what we are doing, what are the implications? Who should participate in the process? So it's the who, the when, the how of the constitutional reforms. That's essentially the conversation that we think is extremely important and must begin now. Apart from TV programs, we're also going to be doing syndicated radio programs. So we will be sitting in a radio station and then broadcasting in real time to 14 other radio stations, if my count is correct, across the nation. And the idea for the radio programs is to ensure that people from various areas of the country are able to contribute what their views are on the constitutional reforms or lack thereof, as the case is at the moment. And then thirdly, we are also, like I said, working with young people. We are going to organize a series of youth debates, and those again are going to be live on Crown TV. So you will help us again to broadcast young people debating constitutional reforms in terms of what things really matter for them in the Constitution and what they think the Constitution should look like, especially that ultimately older people like me are going to leave this country over to younger people like yourself. So it is important for us as an organization that younger people's voices are heard, because ultimately it is them that are going to live with that Constitution whenever we work on it. And so these debates are going to come from the same rural areas, drawing young people from institutions of higher education in those areas. So there will be a debate from Katete, a debate from Kalomo, and so on and so forth in the other towns where the project is going to happen. And then we are also going to organize town hall meetings.
Okay.
So town hall meetings are simply meetings in a particular town, and citizens from various groups come together and discuss what things matter for them in that particular district. The reason we are doing that is because we've seen historically that sometimes constitutional but also other legislative reforms tend to be dominated by city voices. It's the big newsmakers, it's the big politicians. What we want to do
some
now,
faces rather.
Yes, some faces sometimes. But we also want the people that we refer to as everyday citizens, others call them ordinary citizens, ordinary people. What do they think? But also we want to demystify the idea that the constitution is so complex that it doesn't matter to ordinary people. That is not true. We have found that people do know what they want in the supreme law of the land. And so the town hall meetings are going to help us to achieve that objective of bringing ordinary citizens, youths, women, people with disabilities, students, politicians at the local level, the councillors, and everybody else, the media at the local level as well. They all need to come into the conversation.
Interesting. So in case you're just joining us, this is a special program, and of course today we do have Mr. Jimmy Maliseni, the Programmes Manager, coming from Alliance for Community Action, and they have actually rather launched a project called Constitutional Reform, Constitutional Equity and Citizens' Voices. And the topic of discussion this particular morning is ACA on constitutional reforms. Now, Mr. Jimmy, I want to find out how is the project engaging with various stakeholders? Of course, you've mentioned that you've rolled it out even to that common person in our society, but how is various stakeholders coming on board on this particular project?
It's through the activities that I've mentioned, Alfred. So all those activities are not going to be exclusively implemented or delivered by ourselves. And like I said at the beginning, I'm probably the first of two people on a maximum going to appear on this particular platform from the Alliance for Community Action. The rest of the programs or the episodes of this particular series are going to be handled by different people with different expertise. As we both appreciate, the Constitution is such a complex document that there is no single person who's the master of it, either by looking at its content or its processes or its formulation or even its implementation. And so we are going to rely on other actors from civil society, from wider civil society, who are going to help us break down the conversation around constitutional reforms. And then we are also going to rely on everyday citizens. Like I said, we are going to rely on the media, which is what we are doing right now. This is essentially depending on your expertise and your reach as well, to ensure that we are out there. But we are also going to work with state actors. This is a relationship of duty bearers and rights holders. So we on the civil society side consider ourselves as part of rights holders and also helping rights holders access duty bearers. But for this conversation to be complete, it means that we need to have state actors or government people, if you wish, also reached out to and spoken to in various fora. And we hope that they'll be available when we call upon them. But we are also going to rely on the expertise of the legal fraternity in terms of what a good constitutional reform should look like, and what their views and opinions are. But we are also further to those going to rely on the student population across the country. We hope that these young people are going to be able to drive the conversation online. And I forgot one activity, which is that we are going to have young people discussing constitutional reforms online with solid information.
Sure, I was coming to social media.
Yes, with solid information. And those are going to be our primary partners.
Interesting. Now, you've also underscored that the emphasis comes on the youths involvement in this particular program. Briefly, maybe tell us, how do you expect youth to be part and parcel of this particular program?
The debates I spoke about, but also online conversations.
Okay.
On any given day, if you go to social media today, you will find there are a lot of topical discussions. And there's a lot of interest from young people and the general citizenry. From our point of view as the ACA, what is lacking is the quality and depth of those discussions. And so there's a lot of insulting, there's a lot of name calling, there's a lot of politicizing. I don't like that term, but I'll use it anyway. But there's a lot of seeing every topic of national interest from our political biases or political lens. And what we are hoping to do is to have young people discuss the Constitution independent of any political inclinations they might have. Because ultimately the Constitution is our guiding instrument as a country. That is why no matter what we do to reach, somewhere at the beginning in the preamble we are going to say, we the people. We the people of Zambia. So ultimately that is a document that we give to ourselves. And so we should be able to discuss it with correct information, with proper historical perspectives. Young people should be able to reflect, why is it that 60 or so odd years after we got independence, we are still relying on, or not relying, we are still finding ourselves in a perpetual cycle of constitutional reforms. So what have we done wrong in the past that we shouldn't do wrong, we shouldn't repeat this time? How do we address our past failures? What can we learn from them? What went wrong? What went right? What can we keep from previous processes? We want the young people to have that kind of approach when talking about constitutional reforms. But also a lot of decisions have been made by the Constitutional Court primarily around the current status of the Constitution. We think that young people should be able to debate whether or not some of those decisions and explanations should be codified. That is to say, should become part of the law, should be clarified properly. To give an example, Alfred, you will remember that there was by-elections in Kwacha and Kabushi constituency involving Mr. Bowman Lusambo and Mr. Joe Malanje respectively. And what followed after that was constitutional court processes and arguments. Eventually we had those by-elections held without Mr. Malanje and Mr. Lusambo being fully satisfied that justice had been served. But before those two, the current president went to court in 2016 alleging electoral malpractices and fraud. And to this day, he and his running mate then, Mr. Geoffrey Walyamwamba, still claim that their right to be heard was denied of them. You know, so that just shows you the extent to which our constitution is not fit for purpose. However, we can then not impose it as town elites, if you want, or civil society. We would want a situation where young people discuss cases like those and then frame it for themselves. How do we avoid this kind of injustice or lack of satisfaction from our justice system that has been caused by lack of clarity in the Constitution? A Constitution must not cause conflict. It must resolve conflict. Our Constitution at the moment is, it appears, at least insofar as its political provisions are concerned, the electoral provisions and so on and so forth, it's like you're always waiting for something to go wrong. You're walking on glass tiles. Anytime it's going to break. So we want young people to, for lack of a better term, and I say this respectfully, sit soberly around the table on social media and say, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Constitution we have. Is this good enough for us? Can this produce the Zambia we want in the next 50 years? And then that is what we want to, that is what we hope we can ignite.
All right, interesting there. Let's come to another aspect. Now that you've embarked on this particular project, some of the challenges that you've anticipated, what are they specifically?
The same one I just ended by mentioning. There's a possibility that again we are going to find ourselves embroiled in a constitutional reform process that is beset by political bickering and grandstanding and all that kind of thing. So what we are hoping to do through this project is to be proactive, that we proactively address the constitutional reform challenges that we've had in the past. Let's not wait for the problems to emerge. And that is why we are calling on the government of the day, as it were, the ruling administration, to already begin public consultations. Right now, as things stand, the first challenge we have, or the biggest challenge we have, is lack of clarity. Different points of view coming from within the same cabinet. So the president, off cuff, several times has mentioned, please ensure that you are part of the constitutional process when it happens. This is, I don't like this. Ensure that the constitution is amended to address this problem. The Minister of Justice says, oh, of course we're going to do constitutional reforms. Then lo and behold, the Minister of Information and Broadcasting says no. This government has no appetite to embark on constitutional reforms. For us, that's challenge number one, lack of clarity from the administration. We need to know, where do they stand? What are their views? When does this begin? And we want to hold them accountable to their word, because when you read their constitution, their manifesto, sorry, not constitution, manifesto, one of the biggest pledges they make, and we agree with them, is that they would embark on comprehensive constitutional reforms, and they clearly point out that the constitution is not fit for purpose. It has so much lacunae, it argues against itself, it's inconsistent, some provisions were removed without due regard to other provisions that were left in there, to which they should have been speaking. And so what we have is a heavily manipulated document that needs urgent attention.
Do you agree that probably at the moment there's much talk but less action, as you put it? And how do then the general populace tap in this particular project and look at it as a vital tool that they should use?
Well, we are inviting, and we will be extending invitations to citizens across all our platforms. I know that the subsequent TV programs will allow people to phone in and air their views, but also, like we did in the past, we encourage constituents to speak to their members of parliament, because ultimately government reigns at the pleasure of the people. People install governments in place. Power is always vested in the people, and so they give it to whom they please at any given time. And so it is very critical that people keep watch of those that they have given political power, political administration, at any given time. And so what we hope people will do is to reach out to their members of parliament, whether they are independent, ruling party, or opposition. I think it is in the best interest of the country that the members of parliament also begin to listen to their citizens and begin to speak to the government, that this is a matter that can no longer be ignored.
Talking of that, let's come to a collaborative efforts. You've already underscored that you're going to also involve members of parliament. Any other collaborative effort that you're looking forward to?
Yes, so we are hoping that the traditional leadership, which is extremely important in the settings that we work, but also in the country overall, and we are hoping that, given they allow us to work in their areas, they are our gatekeepers. We hope that they too will come on board and be able to facilitate some of our town hall meetings by way of encouraging their people to attend. We have found in our work, Alfred, that there are a lot of areas in the far-flung districts of this country where the traditional leadership is extremely important. Less so in town, not because they are absent in town or we don't have chiefdoms, but the settings are different. In the rural areas, there is a more direct and daily, at least frequent interaction between the traditional leadership and everyday citizens, as well as the politicians, especially the local councillors. And so we are hoping to collaborate with those establishments to ensure that when we say we are having a town hall meeting, then it's not a group of friends, because you can go and say, oh, we're having a town hall meeting, but it's just me, it's and my friends and a few people have called from around. But the traditional leadership structures will know who the other gatekeepers in the community are, who the active youths are, and we are hoping that through those collaborations, we are going to be able to make progress. But also the other collaborations we hope to do, apart from the syndicated national radio shows and this national TV program that we are doing, we are also going to do localized radio broadcasting.
Okay.
So when we are in Kalomo, for example, we are partnering with the community radio station in Kalomo. We are collaborating with the community radio station in Chongwe, as well as in Katete, so that the local voices as well can be amplified even within the boundaries of the districts and the neighboring towns.
Okay. Interesting. In case you're just joining us, this is a special program, and indeed we do have the last Alliance for Community Action Programs Manager here, Mr. Jimmy Maliseni, and he's explaining some of the project, or rather the objectives that are set aside in line of the project, which is dubbed the Constitutional Equity Citizens Voice. Okay, and of course the topic of discussion today is ACA on constitutional reforms. He has actually explained quite a number of issues. Now I want to find out from you, Mr. Jimmy, let's come to how does this project, rather, or the project plan, reach and involve people in rural areas? Of course, you've underscored that you're going to localize some of the programmings using local radio stations or TV stations, but how do you want to engage them, and how do you plan to engage them in other ventures?
So how we plan to engage them, apart from, I think I spoke more about how we are going to identify them.
There are radio dramas,
through the traditional, not radio dramas, but radio programs, radio programs and town hall meetings. But the specific question you ask about engagement is that as an organization, we do not subscribe to the theory of civil society or prominent citizens being voices, so-called, of the voiceless. Our belief and our ethos is that we want every citizen to have the platform to speak for themselves. And so the specific involvement is that they will drive the conversation themselves. They will set the agenda of what matters to them. So we are not going to leave Lusaka and go to Katete and arrive there and say, you know what, the people of Katete, it is important that you speak about this particular issue. This is what matters to you. This is what is important for you. No, we are going to tell them that this is the project, this is the platform we have created, and what do you think? What is important for you? What matters for you in the Constitution? How should the Constitution improve your life, or how can it improve your life? What do you think are its weaknesses? What do you think should be addressed, so that they are able to express themselves? And like I said, the Constitution is a legal document. That's true. But it does not belong to elites. It does not belong to lawyers, for example, to broadcasters like yourselves, or to civic actors like me. It's the citizen's own document. So every citizen must be allowed to speak to what is important for them or to them, so that collectively then we can sit and say, okay, these are the broader views. Let's now give them to people that know how to draft laws, who can then now sit and convert the desire of the citizen into a written law. All the citizen knows, for example, is that if I speak, I don't want to be afraid. I don't want my neighbor to intimidate me. I don't want to look over my shoulder because I said something, provided I haven't insulted people, I haven't been derogatory, I haven't committed an offense. I must be able to speak what is on my mind. It is then left to the professional to interpret that as freedom of speech or freedom of expression, and therefore craft an article that speaks to freedom of expression. All the citizen needs to know is, I want my water to be guaranteed.
True.
I want a good road. I want a hospital that has medicines. Then the professional will understand what right that is and craft it into a right. And that is what we are saying. So let's hear what the people's views and desires are. And that is exactly what we hope that this project will be able to achieve.
I'm sure the viewers also are interested to know when you'll be actually coming to their particular areas. Any, maybe is there a timetable or something that you're following this? Okay, once we roll out, we're going to start with Copperbelt, we're going to start with Lusaka, we're going to start with maybe southern part of this country. Is there a time frame? Is there specific dates that you've set aside?
Absolutely. There are dates, but I think, I don't know what you call ribbon. The thing that scrolls at the bottom of the screen. I think in the next episode we'll try and come with that. I love your question. I think it's absolutely brilliant, so that we are able to give the specific dates. But I can tell you that these programs will run every Monday at 10 hours, like today, for the next 9 weeks. And in the next month, we are going to run the syndicated radio show. The first one of 5 in total. Okay. And then we are going to have one youth debate in each town of Kalomo, Chongwe, as well as Katete and Mkushi, I think. Yes, and Mkushi. And sorry, Kawe, not Mkushi, Kawe. So these will be happening one every month, starting this month. Okay. And then the project will run on for this phase all the way to the end of the year. Okay. So all these activities are spread across the year. But in the subsequent program, I'll be sure to make sure that doesn't even come as a question, but the dates can scroll, and then people in those particular towns can listen to the radio programs, but they can also follow the town hall meetings. Indeed. Yeah.
Okay, now let's come to your expectation, the long-term impact on this particular project. What are they?
Well, the ultimate for us is constitutional reforms must begin. We can debate everything else, but there is no debate on the fact that we need these constitutional reforms to start in earnest, and we are late. Okay, so they must start immediately. I understand that there are some reservations from colleagues who think that it's too late now. You cannot start constitutional reforms at this point in time. The 2026 general election is too close. I totally appreciate that sentiment, but I think that we are going too far ahead in terms of the order of the questions we need to be asking. Okay. So when you say we are out of time, what is the basis of us being out of time? What do you envisage us doing? Because you cannot say that we are out of time where you don't have a plan. You can only say we don't have time if you have a plan and you've looked at it and said, if we follow this plan, we will not meet this deadline. True. So I think that the question of time is extremely important, but this is not the time to be asking about how much time we need. The first question we need to ask is of the government. When are we starting the process in earnest? Because remember that the time is the when, but there must be answered necessarily the question of the how. Before we talk about time, we must agree on how. Partly, our constitutional reforms have failed in the past because we spent too much time arguing on the how. Ultimately, we've never properly agreed on the how. So if you go back, you'll find, especially opposition political parties, boycotting some of the processes that had been agreed upon by only a smaller section of the country. Take 2001, 06 or thereabout, the Manawas attempt. I think it was President Michael Sata, the late President Michael Sata, who ended up suspending a number of his MPs because they had agreed to go into the constitutional reform agenda as designed by the MMD. You had the 2016 reforms as well, shunned by and large by the UPND. Eventually we had to rush, Parliament literally had to rush through the night, several days on end, in order for that process to be finalized, and ending up with the reforms that we had in Constitution Amendment Act number 2 of 2016. So before we talk about time, can we begin with the beginning? Let's start from where we are. The first question, or one of the first questions, there might be others, one of the first questions we need to ask ourselves and agree on is, what kind of reforms do we want? Are we ripping all up the entire document and starting a new one? Are we just changing the current one? We have our views as ACA on what needs to be done, and we are going to express that in subsequent programs. But that conversation must be held. We must have that particular thing. There is also a legal framework that must inform constitutional amendments. So are we going to enact an act of parliament that is going to guide how the reforms will be done? So is there not enough time for us to do that? Should we agree as a country to say we are going to have a constitutional amendment act that is going to guide how this process will go in terms of who will be involved, how they will be involved, where they will be involved, and all of that. So we cannot just rush to say we don't have time. Hypothetically, not that it is what I favor. Hypothetically, let's say we woke up as a country tomorrow and said we've done a lot of constitutional reforms. Let's pick one of the best drafts from the past and adopt it as our constitution. Are you telling me there isn't enough time to do that? Or would there not be enough time? If we just said, okay, what previous drafts do we have? Okay, the Mungomba Constitution Review Commission. This is the constitution they drafted in its original form. Let's not touch it. Hypothetical question, all right?
Indeed.
Just to argue my case that we are going too far ahead when we begin debating there isn't enough time. There can only not be enough time if we've agreed on the process and we've seen that this process needs to be longer than 2026, sorry. Then we can say, okay, fine. Therefore, what can we do from now up to 2026? Of course. We can't just sit and fold our hands and say, no, 2026 is too near, let's forget about the constitution. Essentially, two things will be happening when we do that. We as a country will be acting irresponsibly, collectively. And secondly, the ruling party will be acting extremely irresponsibly because it's a commitment they made in their manifesto. So our argument is we can't just sit. This is an urgent matter and we must attend to it.
Indeed, and as we almost come to a wrap of our program, and in case you're just joining us, this is the Alliance of Community Action Special Program, and today we were looking at ACA on constitutional reforms, and of course they have embarked on a project that constitutional equity, citizens' voices, and we do have Mr. Jimmy Maliseni, who is the Programmes Manager. But Mr. Maliseni, before we end, maybe your closing remarks to the viewers and any assurance to the viewers as well.
Well, I don't know about assurance.
Assuring them that you're coming closer to them.
Yeah, but
you'll definitely be reaching them so sooner than
yes,
they
expect. It's interesting. Yeah, but I can only pledge our commitment to the process, but also to say that we are committed to supporting fellow civic actors in the districts, but also we are ready to support the government to embark on this process through civic education and information campaigns, because some of the difficulties that you run into is a lack of information about the processes. When that happens, we as an organization, and I believe other civil society organizations, will be ready to offer support to the process, primarily through civic education in terms of, like I said, once we've agreed the process. So what, for example, is the submission process? If we go that route where people can submit, can make submissions, whether it's to a commission, whether it's to a panel of experts, or whoever it is that is going to be driving the process. How is the process going to be designed? What are the timelines? We are willing to come on board and support that process. But my message to citizens is that we must hold duty bearers accountable. When we go into an election, we give people the right to govern for our good. As a country, we must realize that elections on their own cannot bring progress to a country. The primary thing that elections do is to bestow the authority to rule or to govern on a particular set of people. It is our relationship as citizens with the government in between elections that drives real change. So what will make progress, or what will result in the progress or lack thereof in 2026, is not because you voted in 2021. It is how you relate with the government, or how you hold them accountable between now and 2026. That is what will determine whether the road will be built, whether your money will be protected from abuse by public officials, whether the hospital will come, or whether there will be medicine in the hospital. So we must move away as a country from thinking that elections on their own are enough to bring the change we desire. We must realize that it is our everyday interaction with the government in between elections that determines the extent to which our felt needs are met.
All right, we've come to the end of today's episode, and thank you so much, Mr. Jimmy, for coming.
Thank you for having me, Alfred.
Sure.
Great.
All right, so we've come to the end of today's program. Remember, just as a background of our Action for Community Alliance states that they believe that without amendments of the Constitution, Zambia's democracy could regress with fairly small changes in political actors. And of course, it is important that you also be part and parcel of this particular project. My name is Alfred Chimba. I've been your host this particular morning. Till next time, it's bye-bye for now. Good morning.